Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the End Time Tribune special broadcast today. This is a super show Brian and I are going to do. Boy, this has been pertinent and on the plate for several weeks now, but I saw this and the Lord just touched me with it. It was time to dump this information out into the ecclesia. So, with that in mind, there has been reports in the news, and this has been stated publicly about these plasmoids, and that got my attention. And I'm just going to give this quote here from Goresh, this government whistleblower. He said, "It's a continuum from corporal bipedal type life to what I would consider as sentient plasmoid life, but there are several that the U.S. government is aware of." By corporal, Goresh means a physical and tangible body with a bipedal that's walking on two legs. This could well be a great alien type of extraterrestrial commonly talked about in the UFO community. So, I'm going to mute my mic, Brian. I've got something to deal with here right off the bat. So, give it minutes of what you think about these
Well, I mean, according to what he's bringing up here, you're dealing with two separate entities. You're dealing with a physical body, and I've looked through the first release of the what do you call it, declassified files in the dump that came out a couple months ago. And when you go through those, you're going to see that there's several craft that were recovered that many bodies were found inside. So that takes you to a whole new level. But I'm going to state this candidly. Over the years, I have seen hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of UFOs, and that's no lie. I have seen physical craft. I have seen what you would refer to as plasmoid entities, something that looks like essentially almost a star moving through the sky, the heavens, whatever terminology you may want to use.
Well, that's actually the first thing I ever saw was what you would consider a plasmoid. I mean, it was just a light in the sky, right? Um, this light stopped in the sky. This light did things, well, that's not physically possible. And this was in full view of a neighborhood. So let's see, it was myself, one, two, three different sets of neighbors come outside onto the street and observe this thing. So, um, the Bible says things that normal people wouldn't put two and two together. But under what circumstance does an angel need to use a tool? Because most appropriately, the Bible loudly declares that these entities use chariots and they also use swords. So this puts things into a different light. It puts things into a different perspective. What is going on here? Well, I'm here to tell you that if you understand what it is the Bible said in the first place, and that stirs up controversy, but basically, I mean, that's what Psalms 104 verse 4 states, that God makes his angel spirits, his ministers, flames of fire. So God is categorically stating that angels, when they're in heaven, are plasmoids. And when they come here, they must, well, the Bible talks about how they clothe themselves and they partook in strange flesh. It just goes with me that one follows suit with the other, and I always recognize this. Now, before I say where I'm going with this, the first time that I remember somebody else talking about what I knew it was a whistleblower from a long time ago. Um, Bob Lazar, when I first saw his interview, and take note, ladies and gentlemen, I found out about Bob Lazar because I used to build models when I was a kid. So, you know, as in car models, like a 55 Chevy Corvette. Of course, my favorite was the Cobra. But anyway, I would build car models. Well, going to the store one time, I saw a model of Bob Lazar's UFO. That's the first time I encountered it. It was from there that I researched to find out what the deal with this was. And Bob Lazar said something very specific. He said, what disturbed him with this tool? I put that in that context so you would be reminded what I said earlier. This chariot. What what really got his attention with this chariot was there was no seams. There was no proof of manufacture. When man makes something and man makes anything, we cannot mold it out of metal. It can't be molded. It must be manufactured. It must be cut into sheets. It can be pressed into certain shapes with limited manufacturing, bending, and noting. But even our most advanced craft on the planet, ladies and gentlemen, do not be misled. The most advanced thing we have are the attack submarines. It's the most advanced thing we have. Those are made in great big pieces and welded together. You can plainly and painfully see that it's manufactured by the hands of men. So we don't have any other technology that surpasses that. The depth they can go, the pressure they can achieve, all, all the things, all the above. And Bob Lazar said this thing didn't have any seams. He said it didn't have an engine room. It didn't have, air vents. It didn't have all the signs that it had been manufactured. This thing had been molded, and that's not possible. So he said there's no wires, there's no conduits. What is this thing? And I'm here to tell you that it is my belief that an angel takes material, that is atoms, it takes material, and it makes it into whatever it needs, i.e., a tool. Like I said, biblically, we are known that they're seen with chariots, and we're known that they carry and use swords. We know they can manufacture garments for themselves. This being the case, everybody needs to take a deep breath and take this the next step. These people are admitting that these life forms are plasmoid. Not only that, we have it on video that government officials are saying that these plasmoids would descend into storms and then come back out of storms. When they come back out, I watched the video, they were plainly UFOs. They went in as plasmoids and they come out as UFOs. So this takes things to a different level too, because when it comes to angels and storms, I hope that everybody remembers about the reference that these entities are involved with hailstorms. Now, that should get your attention because in Psalm 78, in reference to these entities, when God comes out and calls them in Hebrew, Melech Ra. Now, the KJV really does translate this correctly. The New King James Version uses a more politically correct thing, and it says angels of destruction. But actually, for a direct translation, the KJV has it right. These are evil angels. And God plainly states it's these angels that were utilized in the Exodus event. He plainly states that. And you realize that, wait a minute, one of the plagues was hail. Yes, and one of the plagues was this, one of the plagues was that. If you go back through and read Psalm 78, by the time you get to verse 49, and he says this, he cast on them, and them is in this context, he's talking about the Egyptians. He cast on them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, indignation, and trouble by sending angels of destruction among them. So this is categorically stating that some of the plagues of Egypt was these bands of destroying angels. So that takes things to the next level. And more importantly, I mean, I know I'm rambling on here, but remember what Goresh stated publicly, and not only him, but other of these government whistleblowers have stated that there are 4 types of these bipedal. Now remember, the article that I read to you, he said there was bipedals, as in 2 legs, they walked on 2 legs, and plasmoids. There's 4 types. There's the Greys, there's the Nordics, there's the insectoids, and there's the reptilians. This follows with the biblical narrative. When you've saturated yourself with scripture, as I have, this is painfully obvious. There's always 4 antagonists, always. Let's go to Judges 9 and the riddle of the bramble king. We have olive, fig, vine, bramble, 4 antagonists. Let's go to Daniel 2 and the great image. You had head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron. 4 antagonists. Let's go to Daniel 7. You have lion, bear, leopard, and dreadful. Okay. Let's go to the next chapter, Daniel chapter 8. You have first, second, third, and the 4th, which produces the little horn. So let's go to Joel's army. You have the chewing locust, the swarming locust, the crawling locust, and the consuming locust. You have the 4 kingdoms. You have the Assyrio-Babylonian. Did I take you by surprise? Yes, it was. Remember, the people in question were all Akkadians. At first, the Assyrians attacked, right? You know that. You've been led to believe that the Babylonians was a different people. No, they're not. They all wrote Akkadian, same people. One capital was in the north, that was Ashur. The other in the south was Babylon, same people. In Israel, you have the same concept. You have Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Anyway, so the next one you all know is the Medo-Persian. Everybody knows that. The next one was the Greco-Roman. Everybody knows that. The final one, you can prove beyond any shadow of a doubt, was the Arabo-Turkish. Yes, it was. The Arabo-Turkish, however you'd like to pronounce that. I've seen professors pronounce it either way. But you need to know that the core of those that started this was from Arabia. This is why Mecca and Medina are both where? Yeah, they're in Arabia. They did not get their strength until they teamed up with the Turks. So right there, always 4 antagonists, always. And that's literally what these people are rolling out. They're rolling out 4 different types of antagonists. Now, I've went on for quite some time here, so Brian, let me pass it off to you so I can get a drink.
Well, there is several layers that go into this as well with the 4 antagonists, for instance. Discovery had a documentary series that was done a few years back, and these investigators were going out looking into these abduction swarms that were happening in various places throughout the United States. And they found out that each one of these 4 had divided up the United States into their area of control. Now, something very noteworthy here is the insectoid and where they were from, because the more you look into this, you're going to find out now within the classification of these UFOs, they have to be able to do 3 things. They can exist in regular airspace, they can go into space, they can go into the water. When they go into the water, they become the USO, the unidentified submersible object. This is where you start bringing in the abyss. If you start looking into the abyss in the Greek, run that into the Septuagint, you're going to learn some very eye opening things, but especially when you consider the fact that you've got the insectoid that are controlling the underwater area that's associated with the abyss. Okay, this brings things to a whole new level, because you're told in Revelation that these insectoid type creatures are going to come up out of the abyss.
Out of the
So,
abyss.
what are they doing here already?
Right. Um, that probably shocked people. People probably didn't realize that there has been enough data collected that we know that these species don't mingle locations. They carry dominion in different places. And that's enough to make you unsettled. Now, I'm going to talk about something else. Everybody needs to realize that uh, it was Winston Bostick that came up with the definition for a plasmoid as far as physics go. So the word plasmoid was coined in 1956 by Bostick to mean plasma magnetic entity. Let me quote him. The plasma is emitted not as an amorphous blob, but in the form of a torus, which we shall take the liberty of calling this toroidal structure a plasmoid, a word which means plasma magnetic entity. The word plasmoid will be employed as a generic term for all plasma magnetic entities. This is a direct quote. So, um, you think that this plasmoid referring to entities is a brand new thing? No, this was coined in 1956. So they've known about this all along. So let's let, let's ratchet this to the next level. What I'm going to say is probably going to disturb you, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about Bob Lazar, because Bob Lazar said the whole atmosphere was alien. Like I said, there were no wires, nothing would connect the machinery together. It was seamless. There was no plates, no proof of manufacturing, as if this thing had been molded. And then he said its power source was this slug of a particular element that we didn't have in abundance. If I remember correctly, he called it element 115. I want you to imagine in your mind what an angel would do if it came here for a job, it did that job, what it's going to do when it goes back to heaven. Because do not be misled. Nothing from creation can be taken back into the other dimension. And let me qualify what I'm saying. Do you believe the Bible is true? Because the Bible, from the opening verses, said that God made two dimensions. He made heaven, that is the spiritual world, and he made earth, the physical or the material world. That way from the beginning. Angels were made to inhabit the first dimension, heaven. We were designed to occupy this material dimension. So when they go back to their dimension, do you think they take their clothes with them? Of course not. Of course not. You have to carry this to the next thought level. Well, one thing is for sure, we know that the Bible plainly states that an angel took a sword and butchered 185,000 Assyrians. What did he do with the sword when he was done with it? Ladies and gentlemen, he didn't take it back to heaven with him. In heaven, there is no material. So when you realize that, is this what we're looking at with what happened in Roswell? When they were done, they just went back to their proper domain. When they did, what they left behind just fell out of the sky. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say is, it is not my belief that the aliens died and therefore the UFO crashed. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that they were done and they just abandoned them and went back to their proper abode. And these empty shells that they were inhabiting as a container, and they fashioned them this time after grays, they were wearing these, and take note, this government whistleblower did not call them cadavers. It called them what? What did it call them? Ladies and gentlemen, biologics, that word by definition means a biological suit or a biological machine. That's what a biologic is. It's just a biological machine. They didn't die. They just went back to heaven. So immediately, uh, and that's what I'm trying to say. They're not corpses because these angels were not inside these. They were not alive. That's not what it was the spark of the angel that was animating them. And they just left them. And when they left them, both their biologics fell useless, as did their machines fell useless. I probably just blowed your mind, but if you know what to look for, that's in Joel. Let me say that again. That's in Joel. And God says there, he says it in such a way as if, well, they've done monstrous things, is what the Bible says. So I don't know if they're covered in gore. They've devoured, well, I don't want to get too gory, but anyway, it lends credence to this idea that 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 and the book of Jude is correct, that it puts the phrase out in Greek as if when they came here, they abandoned their proper abode. And it would follow suit that when they go back to their proper abode, they abandon whatever they were using when they were here. So look at it this way. In Roswell, they weren't shot down. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't shoot down an angel. But what does follow suit is when they were done doing whatever it was they were supposed to do, or more importantly, whatever they weren't supposed to be doing, they would logically abandon said biologics and craft and material and devices and go back to heaven, because you cannot take material things into the spiritual world. Brian, your thoughts?
Well, this is something I was going to add in from earlier as well, too, and it goes hand in hand with this. Now, something that's been documented with these craft is when they look at them, they can't find any kind of form of propulsion being shown within them. They're not aerodynamic in any shape, way, or form, not to even mention that when you look at the infrared readings around these things, you'll see that there's a bubble around them. Those bubbles are way below standard temperatures. Okay, so all they can figure out is maybe there's some kind of gravity well or bubble surrounding these craft that allow them to move in the way that they're moving through the atmosphere like they do. And after a while, it starts to blow your mind. Um, something else you brought up here with Roswell, for instance. Now, that's within the Four Corner region of the United States. There's four states that all tie within this Four Corner region.
Yes.
That was most notably the Native Americans had a lot of specific religious sites set up there. There's a lot of petroglyphs. But the Native Americans that are native to this area, they refer to them as the Star People, the Greys, and they've had a regular contact with them throughout the ages, going back, stretching back as far as you can even imagine here. So, of course, when you find them at Roswell, they're going to find Greys. That's part of it. And now you go back to this metal that Matthew mentioned as well, that Bob Lazar had on this craft. Well, what did they find at Roswell? They had this metal that you could crumple it up. It was like as thick as tinfoil, but it would go back to its original shape. And they referred to it as being memory metal. Okay. It goes hand in hand with the same idea all the way across the board.
Absolutely. Memory metal, as if an angel had taken this and formed it, and this material, under such auspices, couldn't be altered. And I would say this, that this element, if I remember correctly, forgive me if I'm wrong, I think he called it element 115. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't have any half-life. So, ladies and gentlemen, just imagine what I'm trying to say. They could take atoms, form molecules with them, and create anything they want. Now, this would explain many of the biblical narratives. It also explains um, why they would do this and why, when they're done with it, they just discard them. They don't crash, they don't sink. They're quite simply discarded because you cannot use them, ladies and gentlemen. You can't use them. It is the It is the flame of fire, it is the spirit, it is the angel that powers this thing. Of course, they don't have engine rooms. Of course, they don't have propulsion. Of course, they don't have control knobs. Of course, they don't. Now, in multiple instances, it's been said publicly that what they would have was a place to put their hands, and that was it. No knobs, no gears, no dials. It was just a point of connection between their biologics and their tool. Now, I have to do this, don't I, Brian? If I want to use this mouse, I have to touch it and click it, right? It's just a normal mouse that I use to move my cursor. This is what they're doing. There has to be a point of contact between their spirit and their tool in order to wield it. A tool is not wielded by a manner of propulsion. A tool is propelled by the person utilizing the tool. That's what I'm talking about. It's not a machine per se that is self-propelled. It's just like a knife or a sword or a chariot. What is a chariot? Okay. Think about what I'm saying. It doesn't have a propulsion system. This is why Bob Lazar was brought into this project, to try to figure out how this machine works. It doesn't work. This machine can only be used by its designer. It's used by this angel spirit. This is the power of an angel. So when you look at it this way, and you take a look over Joel's army, there is no consternation with this. The four entities described in Joel, for one, they're not locusts. And for two, you can prove beyond any shadow of a doubt, they are interdimensional. Whatever they're doing, and do not be misled, what they're doing is terraforming. That's what they're doing. But as they go along, it plainly states that their action is felt in heaven, not only on earth. Let me say that a different way. It's felt in heaven as well as creation. From this point forward, I will refer to the material world as creation because creation includes the moon, it includes outer space, it includes everything. Heaven is a different dimension. So from this point forward, when I mention the spiritual world, I'll refer to that as heaven. If I'm talking about the physical creation, I will call that creation. This is the material world. So that's probably has completely blown your mind. But when you know where to look in the book of Joel, this is God, what he specifically states. Now, I know that there's been big time deceivers out there in the church. And one of the big names, I probably shouldn't mention it, should I, Brian? I should not honor his name, but it has been perpetuated on the children of God that what is being talked about here is that the Russian army is removed to a certain physical location and they all die there. No, that's not what's being talked about here. Joel's army is not human. Joel's army is multidimensional. When you read the book of Joel that way, boy, does it get your attention. So, when you look at this, what would happen if these angels clothe themselves just like the book of Joel states? Matter of fact, the book of Revelation says the same type of thing. These things don this biologic, because whether you're seeing an insectoid or a reptilian, that's beside the point. They can make whatever biologic they want. When they do that, what happens when they're done? Well, before I go any further, I'm going to pass this off to Bry to get his comments. Brian, your thoughts, your comment.
Ancient Aliens is even smart enough to figure this one out. Okay, they can spot these areas in the Bible where they know, look, something is coming from somewhere else that's not part of our reality. You know, you've got the chariots described. You've got Elijah being taken away within the chariot. You've got the event that happens with Ezekiel where you see the four wheels that are leaving the temple. Okay, you've got all these varied events throughout the Bible. You've got in Genesis where they step down on the ground multiple times with Abraham and they show up as human beings.
Right.
Okay, they show up in Sodom and Gomorrah as human beings.
Right.
It's a continual pattern. And even, Daniel had multiple times where, if, for instance, Gabriel came down, or you had other aspects
Right.
going on with Daniel at the same time.
Right. Exactly. So that is to say, they can take on whatever form they want. And these plasmoids, I mean, that's the best way to call it. That's the perfect term for an angel. An angel in heaven is a plasmoid, and that plasmoid comes from the spiritual world, enters through a gate or a portal or whatever you want to call it. And we have multiple eyewitnesses, including myself, not only myself, but a co-worker standing looking, and my co-worker, I felt sorry for him because I could tell that he was in shock when it was over. He said, "My God, that was a door that opened and something came through, and I felt sorry for him because he couldn't accept it. He had seen something. Look, he was clearly traumatized. Um, but this is across the board. We have multiple locations saying that this is what happens. If other people will see the light, but they won't see where the light come from. But yet people do say that I saw where the light came from, and it came out of this. They're called many things. They're called portals. They're called gates. So these angels, these plasmoids, come from heaven into creation. And when they do, they gather material, air, water, dirt. They're just gathering material, and they can reassemble that material to whatever meets their use. First, they're clothing themselves, and then they take matter and make tools to accomplish whatever job they're doing. So they're not being propelled by a propulsion system. This is an angel. An angel can not only defy the laws of physics, it's an angel. It can manipulate. This is a messenger of God. As a messenger of God, they can alter physics to do whatever it is God has ordered them to do. And when you realize this and you look at the book of Joel, it will rattle your cage. Because when
You know,
you
go ahead,
no,
finish
go
up,
ahead.
and then I'll bring this up. Well, I was going to bring up on Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. They brought a rabbi out who knew a certain prayer to open a portal, and he explained to them that when these things show up on the infrared, they're going to show up colder than the rest of the area. They're always cold for some reason. I'll go backwards to what I said earlier about these objects that have been filmed by, military craft, naval vessels. Okay, these films didn't just come from some guy with a cell phone, everybody. This is from naval aircraft, from F-15s up in the sky, flying along off our coast or wherever they may be, and filming them and realizing, looking at this, that around them is way cold. We're talking negative 25 degrees. Okay. So when you couple that with what this rabbi was stating on Skinwalker Ranch about it always being cold when they show up, look, I've dealt with a lot of spiritual activity in my life, and I can tell you right now, when that temperature changes, you better realize something is going on.
Yes, they are absorbing the ambient energy. What they're doing is what I just told you. They are taking matter and manipulating it and arranging it to whatever it is they need to do. So what does this do? It creates a cold environment. They're not putting energy into it. They're taking energy out of it to manipulate creation. Look, ladies and gentlemen, cold and heat is only associated with matter. There is no temperature in heaven. Temperature is only associated to at what a percentage is a molecule moving, moving around because they move. If there's very little movement, it's cold. If there's a lot of movement, it's hot. In heaven, you don't have that. But if you're taking from creation, you're taking it out and then remaking it, much like a child does a Play Doh. It's going to create a cold environment. This is why around heavy machinery, when things are going on, this is common knowledge. When things start going on, you smell ozone. You smell ozone. That's why. So, let's get over to Joel and just take a look at what I am talking about here because this will get your attention. So, looking here at the book of Joel, right from the beginning, verse chapter 1, verse 4. You have the chewing locust, swarming locust, and crawling locust and consuming locust here. That is what is the contents of this chapter. And it goes through and it tells you all these things that this army does. Let's head over to chapter 2 here. In chapter 2, whatever they are doing is interdimensional. The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon grow dark, and the stars diminish their brightness. The Lord gives voice before his army, for his camp is very great, for strong is the one who executes his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can endure it? So all the other things it states here, you need to understand that their action is both rattling heaven and earth. It's rattling both the spiritual and the physical and the material. So what happens when they're done? What happens when the whole world has been devastated? And I appreciate that for some reason, the clergy has tricked God's children into believing that for some reason, the Great Tribulation will be just like it is now. They believe there'll still be blue sky, they'll still plant, they'll still harvest. No, ladies and gentlemen, Joe's army is going to render this planet uninhabitable. That's what they're going to do. But here you take note, they discard their biologics, and what happens? Verse 20 of Joel chapter 2, but I will remove from you the northern army, and will drive it away into a barren and desolate land, with its face toward the eastern sea and its back toward the western sea. His stench will come up, and his foul odor will rise, because he hath done monstrous things. So I'm not going to go through all of Joel here, but what I have shared, I think, has been enough. This is what is being referred to here. These angels are going to take on these monstrous forms. They are going to lay this planet waste. And when they're done, like I said before, I don't know. For one, in their consuming, it says very strange things. It says that the storehouses will be in shambles and the barns will be broken down. Let me explain something to you, ladies and gentlemen. The word consuming is very strange. Take note. My wife and I went out to Prairie Springs Campground that was built in 1908. We sat at this picnic table that was that old, and the center pyre was made of concrete. But at the bottom, halfway down, the only thing was left was the 2 half-inch reinforcement wire that the concrete had been poured around. Literally, half that pyre from halfway point to the ground had already crumbled to dust. The concrete had been consumed. The Lord has threatened this many times, and I don't think you fully understand what he's talking about. When you tear apart the book of Joel and read about these locusts and what happens to things after they're done, I'm telling you that when God makes the statement, he's going to destroy the work of man's hands, I don't think you get it. These angels are going to disassemble concrete. They're going to make the concrete turn to dust. They're going to make the nails completely consumed by rust. Literally, this is what he's saying is going to happen on the great day of the Lord. Your barns won't be able to stand up, they'll be consumed. Your bridges won't be able to stand up, they'll be consumed by these angels. Now, this is going to do something to these biologics. So he tells his army to go to this remote place and discard their biologics there, and these biologics will create a massive rot. They will be decomposing. Literally, exactly what people purport to have had happened to these entities that they recovered, these grays at Roswell. They weren't living. They didn't find any living ones, but those biologics would most certainly rot like anything else. Brian?
Well, yeah, and even in that first set of files, like I said, from the disclosure files, there was multiple occurrences from the craft that they recovered where they found these discarded biologics inside of them. One craft had like 18 of them. Now, the United States has what they refer to as the legacy program, which has been going out and recovering these crashed craft, no matter where they may be, even in foreign countries for crying out loud. But they try to make this look as if it's modern. No, 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 no. This is going back to even 1941 when we had, and I brought this up to Matthew earlier today. I called it something different, a broken arrow, because we had talked about this privately, and then yesterday I go and find a reference in a declassified document that came out. It was a memo from Roosevelt stating that we need to get the nuclear secrets from. First, there was one craft that crashed, and then they found three more in California besides the first one in 1941 and 1942. This leads you to believe that they did reverse engineer from these crashed craft the nuclear weapons that were later dropped, or the atomic bombs, essentially, because they were a little different than your modern nuclear weapons, but still the same concept. And I was also going to add in with what you just brought up with Joel. This also reminds me of Isaiah 24. Some of the things that are stated in there about the complete and absolute destruction that's going on everywhere around, and the lamenting in the streets and everything taking place at that time.
Well, let me read this verse here, Joel chapter 1, verse 17. This is what these locusts are able to do. The seed shrivels under the clods. Storehouses are in shambles. Barns are broken down, for the grain has been withered. Whatever they're doing, they are doing to literally everything. They're doing it to everything. And when you realize that, it's literally chilling that if I was going to come out and try to candy coat this for the general public, I would literally state exactly what Goresh said. I would literally call them biologics. I would call them plasmoids. That's exactly what I would do. And that's what got my attention. And I knew we had to do a special edition on this. I knew it from the beginning because people just don't get it, do they, Brian? The most terrible thing about the tribulation, ladies and gentlemen, is 1/3 of the angels are bad. And you're going to be trapped here with them during that tribulation. And they're going to fight over you like cattle. Now, That may take you by surprise. You need to try reading the first 3 verses of Jeremiah chapter 8, and you need to try believing it because it is what they're going to do. These princes are over people, not places. The Bible loudly declares that there were 70 of these princes over the 70 different people. You need to understand that. And the first 3 verses of Jeremiah chapter 8, God comes right out and tells you that the first thing they're going to do when they step foot off of their spaceship is they're going to make you prove who is your prince, because that's who you're going to obey. Now, they're going to form a coalition around one angel whom Satan will hand all of his authority over to. But you're going to have one of these 70 bad boys appointed over you, and you're going to have to prove which one it is. That's what Jeremiah chapter 8, the first 3 verses say. You think they're going to step off their spaceships and tell you, hey, we're here to create world peace. No, they're here to throttle you. So I've probably said some things that have probably bothered you if you were born and raised in the mainstream denominations. But what I'm telling you is true. And I'm telling you that if Jesus Christ was crucified in 30 AD, I'm telling you, you're running out of time. I don't care what church you go to. You need to figure out how to be born again. You better figure that out. You better figure out that being born again it means that you must be baptized in the Spirit. Now, I've probably said a whole lot of things that have upset you and unsettled you. But this is what God's talking about. He's going to bring his band of destroying angels, and I already read to you the verses. It was these destroying angels that afflicted Egypt. When they're done doing what he's told them to do, he will discard their carcasses, and their carcasses are going to rot because it's going to be, imagine how big this host is, because the Bible verse I read to you said this is a huge camp. God's army is a huge army. How many monstrous biologics is it going to take to do everything described in Joel? I don't know how many, but I know it's a lot, and I know the mass is great. Brian?
Yeah, and I don't believe it's coincidence here, folks, that things are being declassified as we speak. You know, there's obviously a reason in the background why all this is happening, but there's a reason in the foreground. Like Matthew brought up, if Jesus was crucified in 30 AD, this is coming down the barrel quickly. And, you know, if to be born again, if you have to wrestle with an angel like Jacob did and have your leg dislocated, basically, then do what you got to do. But this is coming quickly, and
Yes,
it
it's
ain't going
coming.
to be pretty.
It ain't going to be pretty. But it is going to happen, and this is what they're prepping for. I mean, it amazes me that people can't accept that these people that are running the planet, and there's 10 of them. Now, thus saith the Lord, I'm just telling you, there's 10 of them. There's not 9, there's not 13, there's 10 of them. That's what God says. These 10 people absolutely believe the Bible. They know it's not a little golden book. And they're literally putting this as their script. And when you realize that, it should inspire you to start crying out to God. It really should. But one of the big episodes we've got coming up details this very thing because, you know, The most unpopular person in the Bible, it is he that proves emphatically God has used him in history to give you this window. And the Bible says this, that certain things according to 70, and if by strength 80. That's 10 years, isn't it, Brian? Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put this together. It's one of the things we've been prepping for a while. I don't know when we're going to do it, but when we do it, it's going to be a blockbuster because whether you like it or not, all of history screams out one name. And that one name is the biggest bad guy in the Bible. But that's enough for this episode. We're up to the hour. Uh, Brian, have we decided on doing the End Time Tribune on Sundays? Is that we decided on? Or
That's what it looks like, yeah. I think that's what we're gonna do. I mean, Saturday, you've got work on and off, I assume. I
right,
think you have every other week of work, so
right. So look for these special editions. Now, right now, I'm on vacation, so Brian and I could do this. And to be honest with you, I still want to try doing it from my yard. So if Brian has time today, we might do something like that anyway, where I do a YouTube live stream and invite him on. I tried doing this before, but nobody would do it with me. So we might do that because I just don't care. But anyway, the regular program for the End Time Tribune will be henceforth on Sunday. So, Brian, what you got? What's your closing comments?
basically, thanks for joining us. God bless everyone, and, keep an eye on the news, especially this topic. There's a lot of information out there if you know where to look. I pulled a lot of documentary videos off of Prime Video, off of History Channel's little add-on. It's got a lot of interesting little tidbits. Discovery Channel's add-on. It's got a bunch of stuff, but I've been looking into this stuff since I was a kid, so and I've had a colorful life where I've seen a lot of this stuff with my own eyes, so I guess that adds into it even more.
You even experienced it at my house, huh?
Yeah,
Hey,
the old compass having fun.
that's right.
I could sense him right there, though.
Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, till next time. God bless. Godspeed.